I felt that I wasn't, considered desirable because of my skin color. And especially when you think of the wider society with Eurocentric beauty standards, it's very toxic to see those images and internalize those things, especially as a young person and as a young woman of color.
Welcome to Under-Told Verbatim. I'm Solveig Rennan for the Under-Told Stories Project. We report from all over the world for PBS NewsHour. We've talked to experts and people making a difference in their communities. In this podcast series, we revisit those undertold stories to share extended interviews we've done with changemakers around the world. On a Saturday in February 2021, Safiya Mohamed and I went to the mall. We visited the Carmel Mall in Minneapolis, full of Somali shops, restaurants, and a mosque. We were there to find one thing: skin lightening products.
Okay, so when we went into the shop, what did the lady say?
The lady who sold me this told me how this product will make me look lighter and will brighten my skin, and how it has golden glow and carrots products in here, and how that brightens the skin and makes you look beautiful.
Safiya is a Somali American journalism student at the University of St. Thomas, where our Under-Told Stories project offices are based. We didn't want the skin lightening products for ourselves. Instead, our shopping trip played an important role in our PBS NewsHour report on the global desire for lighter skin and the potentially toxic steps some will take to get it.
So often growing up, I would see aunties, people in my community, use these products and try to whiten their skin to look a certain way.
Especially in the United States, many think of racism as a black and white issue, but less talked about is colorism, the preference for lighter skin within communities of color.
And this was an issue that only people who had lived experience know. Not a lot of people know.
Most white people are just simply not aware of it.
Yeah, because it's not their lived experience.
That's our director, Fred DeSam Lazaro, in conversation with Amira Adawe, both messed up to protect from COVID-19. Amira is a public health professional and the founder of Beautywell, an organization dedicated to ending skin lightening practices. She successfully petitioned Amazon to remove 15 skin lightening products that contained mercury. She lobbies government officials for better regulation and policing of the trade in such products, most of them imported.
Beauty and Wellness Talk.
She hosts a Somali language podcast to talk about beauty standards, and she works to raise the self-esteem of young, dark-skinned women so they won't reach for the products in the first place. Our PBS NewsHour report covered the impact of Amira Adawe's activism on the cosmetics industry. But this episode of Under-Told Verbatim explores the impact of Beautywell's Young Women's Wellness and Leadership Initiative. Safiya Mohamed was a participant.
In what context, and specifically what about it resonated with you?
Personally, growing up, I have a younger sister who is much lighter than me. And I remember growing up, people would always compliment my younger sister on her light skin. She gets that from my mom. And I inherited my dad's darker skin. And people would say to my younger sister, "Oh, she's so beautiful, she's so light." There's a term in Somali called Adawe. They would call her Fatima Adawe. And it just means little cute light-skinned one. And I didn't think much of it growing up, but as I got older, it really got to me. And although I would never think about even touching any skin lighting products, the effects of colorism and the desire for lighter skin really did impact my self-esteem. So when I saw a woman like Amira, who was strong and empowered in her own skin, and working to instill that in other young Somali women, it really made me feel I felt comforted.
Throughout your upbringing or growing up, you never felt pressured in any way to use these skin lightening products?
Not at all. My mother was very adamant in making sure that we did not use it. She never used it herself, and she sort of explained it to me in a way that the people that use this use it because they are not secure in themselves, and it is harmful. There are no benefits to it, and you should just stay away from it. So I heard that that reaffirmation from my mother. It wasn't the same thing as being told, oh, you're beautiful in the skin that you are, but it was enough to keep me away from using those products. So I never really thought about using it, but at the same time, that didn't change my insecurity, and those feelings still lingered and were still there. I felt that I wasn't, considered desirable because of my skin color, and especially when you think of the wider society with Eurocentric beauty standards, it's very toxic to see those images and internalize those things, especially as a young person and as a young woman of color. But over time, I've found ways to become more secure in my own skin, and I am in a much better place than I was growing up as a kid, thinking that my skin was not beautiful.
What accounts for that, if there's anything you can pinpoint or things that you can pinpoint that have brought you around to being comfortable in your skin?
Social media. So in recent years, there has been a rise of Black women online who are working to eradicate colorism and show that all types of Black skin are beautiful, not just light ones. And seeing that, especially when I started using social media as a teenager, 13, 14, it really changed the way I saw myself. And seeing darker skinned Black women that looked like me in a positive light and seeing them being presented as beautiful really, it shifted something in me. And it made me think that there's nothing wrong with my skin. And as time went on, I became more secure in myself, more confident in my skin color. And those thoughts that I had about not feeling beautiful because of how I looked, they were just put at bay because of the community of Black women online who are working to eradicate colorism and show that all Black is beautiful.
How exceptional is that? And I guess a part of that question is, could it be generational, you think? Do you find a lot of your peers feeling the same way? And is this idea of colorism more prevalent among older age groups in the Somali community?
I think that my peers are more open to accepting people of all skin tones. I think that most of them are really comfortable in their own skin, and in how they look. And while skin lightening practices and the desirability of light skin over dark skin is more prevalent in the older generation, unfortunately, the younger generation has inherited some of those beliefs because that rhetoric is just so common in the community. However, I think it is important to acknowledge that a lot of us are more accepting, not only accepting, but empowering, and we empower people with darker skin. We solidify that they are beautiful, that their skin tone is beautiful, that there's nothing about the way they look that is ugly or less desirable. And I think we've created solidarity amongst each other because of that shared experience.
Because there is so much product being marketed, whether skin lightening or just general fashion product, that tends to favor models who are lighter skinned, that tends to favor whiteness and proximity to whiteness. Even the Black models tend to be lighter skinned, for example. How does that How do you internalize that?
It is overwhelming at times, and it's the source of a lot of insecurity for so many people. It's the source of my insecurity. But seeing those images being marketed so rampantly and just in your face everywhere you go, it is overwhelming. But again, personally, as I've gotten older, it changed from overwhelming to anger towards the modeling industry because they weren't being inclusive and they still have a long way to go. And I think that in recent years things have changed, and there have been black models and black women and women of darker skin who have entered the industry and have changed it for the better and have showcased the beauty of their skin. But there is still that overarching belief that whiteness is the only standard of beauty, it's the only form of beauty, and anything separate from that or different is not beautiful, it's ugly. And the only way for non-white people to even come close to that standard of beauty is to be lighter skinned. That's, really the source of all of this. But I do think that, again, a lot of black women, a lot of women of color have been able to enter the modeling industry and change it for the better, and that's something that I'm really happy about, because as time goes on, hopefully the next generation of young women of color don't have to think that their skin isn't beautiful.
You talk about more black and darker skinned models in the fashion industry. What about role models outside of the fashion? How important was someone like Amira, for example, in your life as a Somali woman with her advocacy, which is unusual, isn't it?
It felt really good to hear that someone in the community, especially someone that was an adult, recognized that skin lighting was a problem and was willing to call it out for what it is and was doing something about it. In my own family, my mother really pushed it away and said that's something that I should never do. But I never really saw anyone actively challenge it. So when Amira came along and I met her, I felt like something was actually being done about this, and it felt very empowering to meet someone like her. Growing up, I didn't see that many Somali women take on roles outside of what women are traditionally considered to be: housewives, teachers. Anything that was outside of that really was discouraged and not that common. And seeing Amira work in government and work in activism and advocacy and in public health, it was very uplifting, because I was just not used to it. I wasn't exposed to women in my community who were doing the work. And through Amira, I've been connected to so many other Somali women who are also in fields that traditionally aren't meant for them, traditionally because, so many other historical factors at play with that. But it was so empowering to meet her, and my experience with her has been so rewarding. I've gotten so much out of it. And as a young Somali woman, I find it incredibly I really don't know how to describe it, but I feel so at peace and safe knowing that someone from my community is doing the work and paving the way so people like me can follow in her footsteps and not have to endure as many obstacles as she did.
Yeah. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what was involved specifically with your work with Beautywell project? I mean, what specifically were the elements in it that you participated in, that you benefited from?
So I participated. We did a number of activities with the group. So one of them was, the most common practice we had was just addressing wellness and mental health. So we did a lot of meditation. We talked a lot about how we felt, We created an environment where we could be open and vulnerable with each other. We spoke about our experiences as young Somali women growing up in the United States and growing up in a culture that is so different from what our parents were raised in. We did a lot of training on wellness and mental health and how to take care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, how are we going to be able to take care of others and address the needs of our community? We also met a lot of dynamical, change-making Somali women who are doing amazing work within the community. I had the opportunity of meeting Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and sitting down with her and just talking with her, asking her about her experience as a Somali woman who's in the public eye and is doing something unprecedented and amazing. And it was truly such a rewarding experience. And in terms of the work that we did, we had a lot of social media training, advocacy training. We learned about skin lighting practices, skin lighting methods, the root of the problem, the cause, the factors, the enablers, and what drives the industry, and in what ways our community is complicit in letting colorism thrive, and how colorism has played out in our own lives. And we use those experiences and those tools to create an online online campaign to tackle colorism. And at the end, once all of this came full circle, we were able to present our projects to our family, our friends, our loved ones, and to educate them on the problem with colorism, the problem with skin lighting practices, and what we can do as individuals to stop it and just do our part and be the change that we need.
Is there an anecdote or two that you can recall that tells you that you actually made some progress, that you brought people around on this issue? Or do you in general feel like the needle is shifting a little bit?
I think that with Black Lives Matter and with the summer that just passed, with the awareness that has been taking place, and the activism and the work and the conversation, the overall conversation, I think all of that combined, the needle has moved, shifted just a little. Specifically within the Somali community, again, a lot of young people, thankfully, have not internalized the rhetoric now as much as we probably did growing up. And with that, I do think that there is a lot of hope. I think that even though I acknowledge that there is a lot of work that needs to be done within the community in order to completely get rid of colorism, there is change that is happening. And the way that just talking with my friends, just talking with people in my age group, and having them be able to validate my experiences and me being able to validate their experiences, and all of us recognizing that all of our skin tones are beautiful, I think that does show that we have gotten someplace.
So the George Floyd incident obviously was some kind of a catalyst in some ways, bringing people together.
Yes. I think that the Somali community specifically really, when George Floyd happened and when so many people were taking into the streets, when protests were going on, when it felt like Minneapolis was burning, when all of these things was happening, it really did start a conversation within the community as to how are we impacted by this? How are we affected by this as African immigrants that are Black in America? What is our role in combating police brutality and combating racism and anti-Blackness within our community and all the other evils that are plaguing society? And what ways have we been complicit in? What can we do to change that? So emotions were running high. There was a lot going on, but I do think that it has started a dialogue that is very much needed.
Including tackling the anti-Blackness within the Somali community.
Yes. I do think that is something, again, with young people, it really has changed. That rhetoric of, you know, are we black, are we not black, you know, what it means to, because Somali folks are immigrants to this country and they come here not knowing the implications of what it means to be black in America. So it's been a rocky shift for a lot of the older generation. But with young folks, I genuinely believe that we have done a great job in combating anti-Blackness within our community. And we have been able to come to a place where we recognize that we are Black people.
Kusoo dhawow barnaamijka Beauty and Wellness Talk.
That shifting rhetoric Safiya described is something Amira Adawe has heard for herself from callers on the Somali language radio show and podcast she hosts.
Qofka idinla hadlayo waa Amira Adawe.
She agreed. The community is gradually opening up to talk about anti-Blackness and colorism, and by extension, the use of skin lightening creams.
When I started doing the radio show, I realized people were not, because it was live show, so people were not calling and sharing, you know, how they feel and all of that. But when I said it's anonymous, you don't have to share your name. So people started calling and sharing, you know, how it's impacting them. I had some women who talked about they can't even cook because of the heat, you know, like because some of the ingredients have side effects that you can't tolerate sunlight and heat, how that is damaging them. I had a woman call me one time and said, if I stop this, my husband might leave me. And so just hearing these things, and then when we do, before COVID, like when we do face-to-face sessions, just, you know, like posing questions about culture, you know, what do you think of identity? What do you think of self-esteem? And then getting them to the level of what do they even understand about colorism and historic, because a lot of times people are not even aware of the history, original history in their countries. And so people know that they were colonized, but what happened during that time? So helping them understand some of these issues, and then, you know, some of them will open up and talk about how they have been parenting, you know, their kids and encouraging, you know, their young girls to use these products is because they want them to succeed. And so because that was the cultural thing, that if you're light-skinned, you most likely will succeed in life. And even their potential of finding a spouse depends on their skin color. And so them sharing all of that and using that opportunity to educate them, that's how we have been doing. And now we do online. We also have Young Women's Wellness and Leadership Initiative, and that is to really, you know, to end the cycle of this problem. You know, how do we end this cycle with when girls are young, to make sure that when they reach certain age, they don't start using these products.
Our interviews with Safiya Mohamed and Amira Adawe were originally featured in our story called Skin Lightening in Communities of Color, which aired on PBS NewsHour on May 19, 2021. To check out the full story, go to undertoldstories.org. This episode was hosted and edited by me, Solveig Rennan, and produced by Simeon Lancaster. The interviews were conducted by our director, Fred Sam Lazaro. You can find every Under-Told Verbatim episode, virtual reality 360 experiences, and our entire library of Under-Told news reports from around the world at undertoldstories.org. Under-Told Verbatim is brought to you by the Under-Told Stories Project, based at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. As always, thanks for your support.